Okay, good evening, everybody. Sego, Ani, Buju, Ndio, Wachea, Kwekwe. As the mayor of the city of Kingston, I offer these words in the spirit of this gathering. Let us bring our good minds and hearts together as one to honor and celebrate these traditional lands as the gathering place of the original peoples and their ancestors who were entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. It is with deep humility that we acknowledge and offer our gratitude for their contributions to this community, having respect for all as we share this space now and walk side by side into the future. So we were just meeting in a committee of the whole closed meeting. We discussed a couple of items with respect to an update on broadband and also on affordable housing. And so I will ask for a motion to waive our procedural rules and have the clerk report, please.
Moved by Councillor Kiley, seconded by Councillor Hutchison, that Council rise from the Committee of the Whole closed meeting that the rules of bylaw number 2010-1 as amended be waived in the City Clerk report.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Moved by Councillor Kiley, seconded by Councillor Hutchison, that the report of the Committee of the Whole closed meeting be received and adopted. It being that Council approved the purchase of 805 Ridley Street for affordable housing purposes for a negotiated price not to exceed $2,240,000 plus closing costs of up to $50,000. The Council approve up to $2,290,000 for the acquisition of 805 Ridley Street for affordable supportive housing to be financed from the following funds. A, $1,130,000 from the Social Services Relief Fund Phase 2, and B, $1,160,000 from the Social Housing Reserve Fund, and that Council direct staff to submit an application to the Federal Rapid Housing Funding for this initiative and replenish the various funds if the application is successful.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Chappelle opposed. Okay, moving on, we've already approved the addeds this evening. Are there any disclosures of potential pecuniary interest? Councillor Bone. Councillor Bowman, just need you to unmute.
Hi, Ryan Bowen, the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the closed meeting item 1A insofar as it relates to Utilities Kingston. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other disclosures? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. We have no presentations this evening. We have no delegations. We have no briefings. Are there any petitions to present? Okay, seeing none, we have no motions of congratulations, recognition, sympathy, or condolences, or speedy recovery. We have no deferred motions, so we will move right to reports. First, we have report number 79 from the CAO.
Moved by Councillor McLaren, seconded by Councillor Holland, that report number 79 from the Chief Administrative Officer consent be received and adopted.
So there are just the two clauses. Would anyone like them dealt with separately? Okay, seeing none, we will vote on them as a whole. So clause 1, license agreement extension for temporary installation on Ontario Street in partnership with Kingston Accommodation Partners. Number 2, award of contract phase 1, sprinkler standpipe upgrades, life safety enhancements at City Hall. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, on to report number 80 from the CAO.
Moved by Councillor Doherty, seconded by Councillor Hutchison, that report number 80 from the Chief Administrative Officer recommend be received and adopted clause by clause.
Okay, clause 1, First Peoples Group's sole source agreement and updates related to actions regarding Sir John A. Macdonald and his history and legacy. Any discussion? Councillor Holland.
Your Worship, I support this recommendation. I want to just touch on a couple of things that have come up in discussions with members of the public and other councillors. The first of all, I think what we've learned over the last few days, I guess, in the sort of national conversation regarding the move to remove the name of Sir John A. Macdonald from the law school building at Queen's University, that this conversation is happening at a national level, and it has been for some time. And I think it is therefore incumbent on us as a city council to consider that fact and to move forward with the expertise of a group that has done this work with that very piece in mind, that Kingston can be the beginning of a national conversation, or I mean, it's happening, but the sort of that the conversations that we're having around Sir John A. Macdonald are of interest all across the country, and that the fact that this is the first capital of the country and home to Sir John A. Macdonald means that it's quite significant that the conversations that take place here are very have a sort of a national scope in mind, despite the fact, of course, that we are doing this work on behalf of the residents of the city of Kingston. I would argue that residents of the city of Kingston view Sir John A. As someone along those lines, that someone who is not just local, obviously a prime minister who we have history with within this city is important. So I think that combination of goals, meeting the local needs of the residents and also addressing some of the larger conversations and the broader geographic scope of this issue is really important, and something that we've seen develop already through the work of First Peoples Group. So I'm supportive of the recommendation for that reason. And I know that there have been notes regarding what has been identified by First Peoples Group as a priority in hiring Indigenous staff, that they're an organization that works with that are entirely Indigenous. And I think that's something that is also of significance and should be a priority for us as a city council as we continue to do anti-racism work, and that being anti-racist means doing things like ensuring that the work that's being done regarding issues related to Indigenous history be completed by Indigenous people, and that those individuals receive remuneration for any work that's happening regarding their history and their view of this particular issue. So I support the recommendation, and I just wanted to make those comments to hopefully contextualize this conversation tonight to some extent. I think staff have done a great job so far in initiating this process, and I'm really excited to see what comes of it working with First Peoples Group.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Mayor Patterson, through you. I want to echo Councillor Holland's comments. I think that they're very important, and that context is key in making this decision. One thing I want to address in emails from constituents, and there's been conversation with councillors too, is the value of a sole source contract. And I think that it is legitimate to question whether or not the city as a general policy should pursue that in hiring outside consultants. But I don't think that's a conversation for this moment, because First Peoples Group have done such a tremendous job building relationships with the local Indigenous communities, multiple nations represented in our city, and other community members. And to use questions of sole sourcing as a way to not move forward in what is a very difficult road towards reconciliation, and to sever all those relationships that have been forged over the last number of years with this most excellent consultant would be much more problematic in my view than getting lost in what is a very legitimate policy question. So if councillors are considering that as a way to either defer our decision tonight or maybe not go forward with First Peoples, I would caution that that could actually be counterproductive, exponentially so, jeopardizing a lot of good work that's been done, especially because we've seemed to find consensus on slow and important moves towards reconciliation. So I offer that. I'll be supporting the motion. I'm very pleased with the work of First Peoples and look forward to what comes next through hopefully future work with them.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Neal.
Thank you. I'm just curious, and this would probably be a question to staff. Is there anywhere within our contract with this group an assurance that there's full engagement of the local Indigenous community? Because we have a lot of activist Indigenous groups and individuals in the city.
Okay, who from staff would like to take that one?
I don't think it's a trick question.
Your worship.
Just watching.
Your worship.
Yes, Mr. Wigginton, go ahead.
Yes. Through you, your worship, in response to the question, I don't anticipate that the contract itself gets into that kind of specificity of language around the directing of the work, but I can assure you and council that the proposal that's been submitted by First Peoples Group in response to the scope of work that came out of our July 7th and 8th discussion very clearly articulates and recognizes that need to engage with local residents as key participants in this process, and that has been recognized from the get-go and is understood to be a priority going forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, next is Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Well, the working group is I just would like to just thank staff for bringing this forward. I'm really pleased to support this. The working group, I believe, speaks to what Councillor Neal was just his concern that it would include the voices of our local community, because there's I noticed in the report, it says the Alderville First Nation and the Mohawk Bay and Quinties would be included from our surroundings, but also that there would be 3 local Indigenous people who no doubt will be closely connected with many in our neighborhood, in our community, as well as 3 other members from our community. So it speaks, certainly this working group speaks to a lot of local voices. But I did want to also know a little bit more about the process with the working group and if the public will be invited to the discussion. So I wonder if staff could please speak to that.
Mr. Wigginton, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, your worship. Yes, as you've identified, Councillor Doherty, there will be full representation from those traditional keepers of this land, the Mohawk and the Mississauga of Alderville, representation from the local Indigenous community as well as community members. As is cited in the document, working within the parameters of the committee bylaw, we are proposing that this working group would be one that directly reports to council as opposed to going up through some other standing committee, as is often the case with committees like this. So we are anticipating, as is the case with any working group, that these meetings would be open and accessible to other people who wish to not only hear the conversation, but perhaps have an opportunity to provide input through the available mechanisms as well.
Okay, is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Chappelle.
Thank you, through your worship. I had an opportunity to reach out to Mr. Wigginton prior to tonight's meeting, and we discussed the opportunity that we brought forward with a number of recommendations at our July meeting that are in progress, renaming the bridge, stripping the name off the train, different things like that. And we've really come to a great opportunity where there's a grouping of information that I think has been built on the bicentenary project, which two of the councillors on council were intimately involved with. There's been a lot of work going forward, and we'd already spent over $90,000 plus expenses for up to that work. Now I look at the scope of work going forward for the same time period of 18 months, and the price is now $190,000 plus expenses. And it troubles me that we would be spending that much money when we've come so far. We've had the bicentenary, we've had local expertise, we've got, you know, what's going on locally with Queens. I think that at the end of the day, at the end of the 18 months, they're going to say, hire a liaison person to work maybe with Holly in the mayor's office. You know, hire an Indigenous person to you know, do cultural outreach. You know, really put your money where your mouth is. And I'm suggesting that what we really need to do is a sole source contract of this much money when there are so many other relatively more local Indigenous consulting groups in Barrie, in Peterborough, even on Wolf Island. They're out there that allows us to keep that information localized. But even beyond that, I think an investment of $200,000 would go a lot further to hiring someone locally in the city that will do the city's work and be that liaison with the Indigenous community. And we can invest in them, a union paid job, invest in them to do the work and keep all that information local. And so it's with that in mind that I do have a deferral motion that I'd like to get on the table at some point during this meeting. I'm not sure if it's time to do it now or if we have to continue more debate.
So, Councillor Chappelle, you have the floor. But this is your one and only opportunity to move any motions to defer.
Okay. So what I would like to do is that Kingston City Council, and I believe I'll get it posted. Mr. Thompson has it. And I do appreciate Councillor Neal's seconding this, so at least we can have a discussion. I know he likes to support the democratic process. So the motion is simply that the City of Kingston defer report number 20-227 regarding First Peoples Group sole source agreement and updates related to actions regarding Sir John A. Macdonald and his history and legacy to the first meeting of the Administrative Policies Committee in 2021 in order to allow an opportunity to assess the merits of the sole source contract in comparison to supporting and training and or hiring an Indigenous liaison officer who will leverage community contacts and retain the Indigenous knowledge and expertise locally for future generations. And that is my motion.
Okay, thank you. So it's moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor Neal. Councillor Chappelle, I think you've spoken to the motion to defer the rationale. So as you know, the parameters that I set as chair for a motion to defer are time, place, and direction. So I will entertain any comments or discussion on time, place, or direction. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might need to see the motion again. I'm not sure if that's possible. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, direction. I mean, this is asking for the merits of something, which to me indicates a request to staff for a report with options. And that seems to suggest there would be a fair bit of work involved. So I guess the question is to staff or to the mover regarding essentially asking for a report, but suggesting that it's just simply a small bit of information on the merits of something, which presupposes that there is merit.
So perhaps a question to staff. Are staff able to address the question in the motion to defer right now? Mr. Wigginton, go ahead.
Thank you, and through your worship, it would be helpful to understand with this motion of deferral what the expected next steps would be from council in terms of making the assessment that it identifies in The early part of 2021 is the assessment to be led by staff or in concert with council, so that we would be able to plan appropriately. As has already been indicated this evening by Councillor Kiley, a deferral I also would want to flag would involve us as staff having to go out to the community as well to let them know that this process is being deferred until 2021. And ideally, we would like to be able to, in such a scenario, be able to suggest to or communicate to the community what the expectations might be in terms of their involvement in assessing what is being suggested here in terms of an alternate approach from the one that's been identified through various council reports leading us to tonight.
Councillor Holland, do you have the floor?
So what I'm hearing is that this would be considered new council direction. And so with report pending on new options with a timeline that we can't determine. And so I don't know if I'm allowed to say how I'm voting, but I think it's pretty obvious.
Okay. I saw a hand, but I can't remember who it was. Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, Mr. Wigington, for your work so far. I guess I'm going to have to ask the mayor for a ruling on this amendment, because my reading of this amendment is that it sends us in if passed, would send us in a different direction than that of the recommendation that it's amending. So my question would be to the mayor, if this amendment passes, what would that mean to the original recommendation?
Thank you. Can I see the motion to defer? Okay, so my interpretation of this defer is that essentially is putting on hold the work that was planned in order to allow for another method, another option to deal with this work. So it's allowing for another alternative, but is not directing that other alternative. So it is, in that sense, a proper motion to defer. It's not contrary to the motion, but it is putting the staff direction on hold in order to allow for another option for consideration. That's my interpretation.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with your interpretation. Having read it again, the recommendation before us could pass as amended, or it could pass when it comes back from deferral to council, regardless of the outcome of the analysis of comparing the training or an Indigenous liaison officer versus the present recommendation, which does not include that piece. So it's adding that other piece. I would say that for the purposes of this amendment, it's important to understand what the most important aspect of this work is, and that is to have knowledgeable Indigenous voices essentially as the prime source of information on this work. An Indigenous liaison officer would do this, so would having knowledgeable Indigenous members of the working group, if their recommendations from the working group are also the main thrust of the work to be done. So I would say that the two are complementary. The question is, as written, does the composition of the working group, are we happy this is the best way to find that strong Indigenous voice that we need to direct this work. It's a sole source contract with folks that have spoken to council before, and we know the work that they've started and some of the things that they recommended that we change, as we've already seen at the last time they came. I don't have assurance that the staff recommendation is actually as good as it could be to highlight that Indigenous voice. And I think that considering the extra elements that are being suggested in the deferral are actually complementary, and therefore I will support deferral.
Okay, thank you. So just, I see your point of order. Before I get to your point of order, although I've been asked to provide an interpretation of what this motion to defer means, I think it's important also that we get that from staff as well to make sure that we are all on the same page about exactly what's in front of us. So I want to give staff the opportunity to digest this and then be able to provide that answer. So I'm going to propose a 5-minute recess, and then we'll come back and continue. So Councillor Hutchison, you will be next on my list when we come back. So 5-minute recess. Okay, we're going to reconvene, folks. So, Councillor Hutchison, I've heard from you and from another councillor as well with a question about whether this motion to defer is contrary to previous council direction. So, what I'm going to attempt to do is explain my interpretation of what this motion to defer is saying. My ruling is it's not contrary. I'll try to explain why. Then I am also going to ask staff for their input on time, place, and direction in the motion to defer. So my interpretation is that in July the 7th, we approved a set of actions that were to take place. We didn't specify that it was First Peoples Group in a sole source contract to do that. So there is work that we have determined needs to be done. This motion to defer would essentially delay the awarding of a sole source contract to First Peoples Group in order to allow for development or consideration of another option to do that work, which is to hire somebody in-house to do that work. So it's not that we are hiring someone in-house instead of engaging in that work. It's basically who's going to do the work. That's my interpretation of the motion to defer. Councillor Chappelle, if I can get a nod that I have that intent right. So that's why I'm not ruling it as contrary to our previous direction, nor is it a reconsideration. That being said, I will ask staff to please comment on their interpretation of the motion to defer, specifically regarding to timing, place, and or direction. Commissioner Hugo Boss.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you in response to the question. So, yes, I believe staff's interpretation is the same as yours in that the deferral is to consider the merits of and compare hiring a person to join staff and to carry out this work. So the impact of that would be time, number one, in that it would take a number of months, probably 5 to 6 months, to properly scope the position, reach out to the community on the role and responsibilities and how that work would function, recruit for that position, hire, contract, and then bring on. So I would think that realistically is a 5 to 6 month process. And the question would be, well, that wouldn't start until some analysis here is done to compare the differences and brought to Admin Policies Committee in early 2021. And then if the direction is to go in that direction, then we would need to recruit from there. So definitely multiple months of option and the possible impacts to budget versus having approved capital budget right now to do this work and all the work that will be necessary to bringing an operational staff person in-house to be paid, as well as the budget needed to do all the work and the outreach from there. So that's how I interpret it. I see those are the impacts, and happy to continue to answer questions on the deferral on the floor.
Point of order, Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I'm very hesitant to even ask this, but if I disagree with your interpretation of whether or not something is contrary, do I have to formally challenge the chair?
Yes.
And in doing that, do I get to state why I'm doing it?
Yes. If you challenge the chair, then you get a minute to explain your rationale. I take a minute to explain my rationale.
Fair enough. So I'm going to challenge the chair with great respect and just offer a different reading, because when I look at what I believe was passed on July 7th, the third point of the resolve clause says that council would form a working group led by First Peoples Group and supported by city staff, et cetera, to manage this ongoing discussion in relation to landmarks in the city. So in that actual resolve clause, it said First Peoples Group. So we've already agreed to it So to say now we might not is actually contrary to a motion from just a few months ago, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay. Give me 1 minute. Okay. All right. So, Councillor Kiley, your challenge to the chair is accepted by me. That is fair. I didn't have the motion in front of me, but given that reading of it, that is true. That does make it then a motion of reconsideration. Just give me 1 second just to defer to consult with the clerk on next steps here. Okay, so here's what needs to happen. So Councillor Chappelle, if you want to go in this direction, you will have to introduce, before you can introduce your motion to defer, you would first need to introduce a motion of reconsideration. It requires 2/3, especially if you're going to put it on the floor right now. So can I just ask, is that if you want a motion to reconsider the decision from July the 7th, and then we can proceed from there. Councillor Chappelle.
For clarity, through your worship, I guess the only clause that I would be looking to reconsider is the automatic renewal of a sole source contract moving forward, and have an opportunity to look at other options. And I'm not saying we wouldn't utilize them, but I guess in essence, in order to achieve the more fuller respect for tax dollars, to look at all the opportunities to do this job well with local talent, I'm asking for most.
So Councillor Chappelle, you're not going to be able to get around this. I understand what you're trying to do, but you can't. You're not going to be able to further
reconsider then.
So what you need though is a motion. No. First, we need a motion to waive the rules, procedural rules, to put forward a motion of reconsideration, because normally a motion of reconsideration needs to come in a normal council agenda that has to be submitted 1 week before the meeting. So what you need is a motion to waive the rules, waive the procedural rules to allow for you to put forward a motion of reconsideration.
Or a motion to waive the procedural rules so that I can get this on the floor.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Bowman. Okay. So on the motion to waive the rules, just so everyone's clear, this is going to be a motion to waive the rules, waive our procedural rules to allow Councillor Chappelle to put forward a motion of reconsideration. It requires 2/3 to pass. Okay, we will call the vote. All those in favor?
Oh, wait, there's a
Councillor Stroud, point of order.
Sorry, I just wanted to highlight that although it's a 2/3 vote, this is not the vote for reconsideration. This is the vote to waive the procedural rules. There'll be another vote on the reconsideration.
Right, so Councillor Stroud, so just so we're clear, yes. First, you need a motion to waive the procedural rules in order to allow for a motion of reconsideration. Then the motion of reconsideration has to pass, and then the motion to defer would then be in order. Okay, so on the motion to waive our procedural rules to allow for a motion of reconsideration, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, Okay, and that does not reach a 2/3 threshold. Councillor Chappelle, you still have the floor if there's anything else you wish to add.
Well, I would like to say perhaps that a motion coming forward later this evening will highlight the reason why we need a committee to review financial expenditures in the city. So I thank you for your time. I'm sorry it took so long.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Hutchison.
Do I unmute myself? I just want to say that, first of all, something that is probably inadvertently being missed is that this whole process involves the whole community, not just the Indigenous members of the community. And that this public will have plenty of opportunity for consultation. The public, the broad public, including Indigenous people, but all other citizens as well. And I think that might be getting lost in the understandable desire of councillors to ensure that there's Indigenous representation, because what this is about truth and reconciliation. This is about trying to do something about righting long-term grievances and wrongs to a certain group. And so that's why we're doing this. If that wasn't the case, we wouldn't be doing any of this. So there's that. And then just a note on the sole sourcing of a supply or a service. This is not unusual. It happens all the time in the digital technology side of that is council and mostly staff deal with. And it happens with any number of services that the city contracts for, because somebody brings a particular expertise, a particular knowledge and understanding of what we do and how we operate. And so we pass these things for those reasons, because it's not always just about the money. It's about, can you do the job? And we ask questions, particularly about First Peoples and their experience. And they indicated they had quite strong, in direct involvement in the truth and reconciliation process at the national, I think it was on the national level. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't continue. And as Councillor Kiley's point was, that we did agree. I remember that very clearly, and I was the other councillor who raised it, that we would go ahead with this company. So it seems to me that that there's no reason not to support this. Work has already started. That's the other thing that could be made. So we're just saying, yes, we take this seriously. We're going to continue on. And I think council in general, no matter how they felt about this little rush of motions just passed, does take it very seriously. And I think that's the message we want to send. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Councillor Strad.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't disagree with anything Councillor Hutchison just said, especially the way he started by saying if we weren't serious about righting some historical wrongs to a particular group, we wouldn't even have gotten this far. And of course, so the question on the table tonight isn't, are we going to continue with this process? I think it's pretty clear we have the consensus to do that amongst council here. And we're a group that doesn't really involve any Indigenous voices. So, and that's important because we represent the descendants of the early colonial powers that set this whole centuries old course of events in motion. And, you know, the question is not are we going to do this? The question is, whoever we get to do this, are they going to have the tools, the expertise, and the drive to do it properly? Because I think it needs to be said openly, if this process ends up being a lot of consultation with no real effort towards truth and reconciliation at the end of it, it's going to generate more cynicism around this issue than ever before, and it's going to directly implicate all of us in that cynicism. So it is very important that whoever's doing this work understands the complexities, the challenges, and how to deliver at the end of it something that brings us, where people can say the Kingston City Council is serious about truth and reconciliation. Because looking at the bunch of us, the 13 of us, you know, if you're Indigenous and you're looking at this group, you're not going to assume that we are empathetic because we haven't really proved it yet. So, so that's what's at stake, and why I was sort of open to being more thorough in the selection. That being said, the suggestion came and was not procedurally possible. So we will now have to trust, if we pass this tonight, that the proponents in charge of this work are able to deliver that important Indigenous friendly voice that we need to hear to guide us, because none of us here know how to do this and pull it off in a way that will be accepted by First Nations. And it's very high stakes what we're doing here. And I just wanted to make that point. I do support the process, but I do not support going halfway. If we end up going halfway, it will end up having been a mistake, a really insulting mistake. And so I will support the recommendation, and I'd like staff to ensure that this does not go in the direction of something that ends up being closer to lip service and not true reconciliation. Thank you.
Okay, next is Councillor Osanek.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question through you to staff, and that's just so I can understand the sole source agreement better. And what I want to question is just the price, the cost of $182,500 for this agreement. So it wasn't an open bid because this is recommending sole source. Is that what staff expected in the budget? It says in our report that it's going to be funded from within, where do I have it? Previously approved capital budgets of Engage for Change and Your Stories, Our Histories. What's the opportunity cost of spending $182,000? Was like, is this what we expected, that much money for this phase 3?
Okay, Mr. Wigginton.
Thank you, and through your worship, a couple of responses to your question, Councillor Osanek. The monies that are needed to support this work were budgeted for, and you know, does account for what was required. And you know, we pursued the sole source initially in 2018, as Council had previously approved, based on recognition of what had emerged from Engage for Change for the need to have that kind of expertise that First Peoples Group brings as third-party objective supporters of this work. And so, you know, the work is accounted for in our budgets, and the pursuit of a sole source was something that came out of the process as it evolved, recognizing the need for the kind of dynamic that this group brings to the discussion and the needed outcomes that we're seeking.
Okay, thank you. Is there going to be a proposed phase 4, or is this it then?
Through you, Your Worship, Our hope is, based on all the reporting we've done to council at this point, that Engage for Change itself as a project will complete after 3 phases. And that's what's been identified in the scope of work with First Peoples Group. But just recognizing that the proposal that is before us for the continuation of this work involves 5 different elements. The completion of Engage for Change at the beginning of Q1 2022, the naming of the 3rd crossing, the consultations around Sir John A. Macdonald, and the continued work around what's emerging as intergovernmental relations. So there's a complex series of interrelated initiatives here that are captured within the current scope.
Okay. Am I allowed one more question, Your Worship? Yes. Okay. My last question then is, one of the recommendations is to that First Peoples Group would then support hiring a staff position, an Indigenous curator that could help in the development of exhibitions. Would that be the full scope of the full-time staff position, or would that be also acting as a liaison, perhaps?
Through you, Your Worship, at this juncture, that position is being conceived of as a contract position, particularly related to the work of the Cultural Services Department and the emerging cultural heritage strategy that we've discussed. Their role would be to work alongside as part of city staff in the development of content that's specific and Indigenous focus, so exhibitions, programming, special events, and the like. So its scope is very focused and is expected to be finite at this point. What's not clear at this juncture is the outcomes of the intergovernmental relations piece, that what has been brought forward tonight as something for consideration, this idea of Indigenous liaison position, could potentially be an outcome that we see as a long-term support for the legacy of this work that's happening right now. So they're 2 separate endeavors at this point, potentially.
Thank you very much.
Okay, is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Okay, we will call the vote on clause 1. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Councillor Chappelle opposed. Okay, on to clause number 2, climate leadership plan update, appointment of community advisory group, and update on climate leadership division initiatives. Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank staff for this report and the work they're doing. It is moving. I think when you read the report, you can see we're moving along. It's and as it needs to, as I think there's a few members of council that would say that. And so I just wanted to say it's good to see it's happening. I got a briefing from staff, perhaps other councilors did too, indicating we're moving forward on all these fronts, including the climate change management strategy that was necessarily underwrites this. And so I'm looking forward to what comes next, and just wanted to thank staff for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Chappelle.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was looking at the makeup of this appointment committee, and I was really wondering why there wasn't anyone from rural communities. In fact, there'll be someone who might be interested in water quality or water assurance, or someone that understands the complexities that we face with the changing climate in the rural communities that impact water. And I was wondering if there'd be openness to include a representative from that aspect of our rural partnership in Kingston.
Ms. King.
And thank you. And thank you for the question. So the community advisory group, as you see here.
Ms. Salter-Keene, I can hear you, but only just. I'm just wondering if it's possible to adjust your volume.
Is that better?
Not really.
that better? No?
It's marginally better. Maybe you could try that, and then we'll just see if council can hear you okay.
Okay, I will speak loud and hopefully that will get through my microphone. So thank you for the question, and through you, your worship. With respect to the question of the rural advisory and some water experts, we have the technical advisory committees as well, and sitting on the mitigation and adaptation teams are CRCA, as well as members of the Rural Advisory Committee who bring the technical expertise to those two teams. Thank you. Did you hear that?
Did everyone hear that okay? Okay. Councillor Chappelle, you still have the floor.
So the answer, I'm assuming on the very low volume that I heard, the answer is no, we're not going to have a rural expert that deals with water on this committee. And that is going to be in a different silo of another committee.
Okay. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Oh, yes. Councillor Neal.
Thank you. I appreciate how many community organizations are included on the lists, and clearly there's a lot of community people that have been included. I have a couple of questions, and this may lead to an amendment if necessary. I'm wondering if you had an opportunity to approach Kingston District Labor Council to see if they would be able to be interested in engaging in this process.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor. So I've heard from Ms. Salter-Keene. Unfortunately, her power went out, so her computer is rebooting. So I may ask the CAO to jump in here. As per previous response, there are different committees with respect to the mitigation and adaptation, but this is a community-driven organization. I unfortunately don't have that information right now, but CAO Hurdle may be able to add.
Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't have that information right now either, but that's something, if that's something that council would like us to follow up on, we can definitely do that. Councillor Neal?
That would be great. I would appreciate that. And my one other question, I know Invista has been very active in the community and very supportive of a lot of community endeavors. But this is a climate change focused working group. And I was surprised that Invista was the only industrial, if I'm not mistaken, the only industrial participant on this endeavor. And I guess that is possibly frustrating, despite all of the good things that Invista does in the community. They are a subsidiary of the Koch brothers, who for years have been funding climate change denial, and for them to be the sole industrial participants on this, I find a little troubling. And I did send, and I hope that Mr. Hugenbos got it, I did send a couple of questions out, including this question. Is there an opportunity? I believe CAO Hurdle said there's an opportunity to expand perhaps without having to amend this recommendation for Kingston District Labor Council, would there also be an opportunity to reach out to DuPont or perhaps one of our innovative, smaller possibly Canadian industries here in town for better representation?
Absolutely, through you, your mayor, absolutely, and we can definitely do that. There's nothing set in stone strictly here, and that work might be best on one of the technical mitigation teams or on this, and we can definitely reach out to a party or parties to help.
I would greatly appreciate that, and so would several people in the community as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Quickly, a question of clarification for staff. At the very top of the report, it says that there's the goal of reducing greenhouse gases by 15% across the city. And then in the body of the report, it talks about that goal being across the community. And I know a few times there's been confusion about that. So I just want to clarify, this group will be looking for 15% reduction for all of Kingston or just within the corporation?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, as per council's priorities, it's the work of the city is to reduce 15% of corporate GHG and also support the community in reducing community GHG by 15% over the term of council.
Okay, thank you.
Next is Councillor Stroud.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just want to draw the council's attention to some past committees, some now defunct, others in modified form, that ran into trouble when their numbers were such that they either weren't making quorum, or when they had meetings, there were so many voices at the table that it was difficult to move ahead with the agendas. One example of this was the Kingston Environmental Advisory Forum, which had a similar look to this with many representatives from many different groups. This is a long-standing advisory group to reports through EITP, but it advises council, and was actually changed not that long ago because of this problem. And I'm worried that the number of mandated members in this group might send us down that road again. So my question to staff is, first of all, is it true that what's in the package with the list of 18 groups, is that meant to be the composition of the working group? Because I was unclear when Councillor Neal was speaking, because I didn't see Investa in that list. So I was confused as whether you're suggesting that we add them, and if not, where is the institutional sector on this list, I suppose, is the question. And or maybe there's been a new list and I haven't seen it because I'm going by what was in the package. So first question is the list of 18 members of the advisory group accurate as to what the recommendation is?
Salter Keene.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. Can you hear me better now?
It was definitely better just near the end.
Okay, well, I apologize for the delay. My computer system needed to reboot. So with respect to the Community Advisory Group, it is an advisory group. It's not a working committee of council. They will work with the consultants and with city staff, similar to what we did with the Kingston Penitentiary Visioning. We had a working group that was a sounding board for staff and for the consultants prior to going to the public. So when we would have our draft strategy, or when we moved to our impact statements, we would use them as a sounding board. So that it's not a working committee, but an advisory group that would report to to staff as well as to the consultants. I missed a few of the questions, but with respect to Invista, institutional, the industrial, they are on technical advisory teams. And as you know, when you're selecting groups, you only can select so many at a time. So certainly they're representative of their sectors, and those that are not on the technical groups would be then consulted individually or as focus groups of that sector as we move out throughout the process. Thank you.
Okay, so I would just submit to council before we get into individual councillors suggesting adding more members is that the way staff just responded is that this is a sort of meant to be a sounding board for work by the consultant and by staff, and not the representation doesn't need to be complete. It just needs to be large enough so that it can hear enough of the different voices of the different groups, so that the work doesn't, I guess, head off in the wrong direction and things like that. That's an important point, because if this was meant to be something like KEEF, where they meet and they follow an agenda and they form subcommittees and the members are the ones doing the work, then it would probably fail for because of its large size and lack of compartmentalization, I guess. So I guess I'll just leave it there. I'm skeptical. What this group can bring in a concrete fashion to the work by the consultant. At the end of the day, again, like the last item, we need results, and if we want to get that 15%, we need to start moving. And it's not so much consultation and analysis that needs to be done, as was mentioned by some of you when we spoke about this at strategic planning. What needs to happen is groups suggesting easy, immediate reduction methods. And that's why I thought the institutional membership was very important. And I'm sure that everybody has within their organizations people making these suggestions. But it's time for action. This is about climate action. So again, I'm looking forward for the concrete steps to come back from this process, and I hope it doesn't get slowed down by the bulk of the members of the advisory group, as we see 18 members isn't really a committee, it's more like a convention. And you're not going to be able to assemble 18 members on a regular basis. So that's about all I have to say. Good luck with the work. I will be supporting this recommendation.
Thank you. I don't have anybody else on my speakers list. Councillor Chappelle, you've already spoken.
How much was the?
No. So with that, we will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And Councillor Chappelle opposed. Okay, on to report number 81 from Planning Committee.
Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Kiley, that report number 81 from the Planning Committee be received and adopted.
Okay, so there are two clauses. Unless anyone would like them separated, we will deal with them as a whole. Clause 1, approval of zoning bylaw amendment 67 to 69 Chatham Street. Clause 2, approval of zoning bylaw amendment 425 and 427 Division Street. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Report number 82 from Committee of the Whole.
Moved by Councillor Stroud, seconded by Councillor Hill, that report number 82 from the Committee of the Whole be received and adopted.
There's just the one clause, Council Strategic Priorities 2019 to 2022 refresh. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Report number 83 from the Administrative Policies Committee.
Moved by Councillor Stroud, seconded by Councillor Kiley, that report number 82 from the Administrative Policies Committee be received and adopted.
There are 3 clauses. Would anyone like them separated? Okay, we will deal with them as a whole. Clause 1, tax write-offs pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001. Clause 2, uncollectible tax write-offs pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001. Clause 3, sewage systems under Part A of the OBC. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, information reports. If you have a question, just raise your hand as I read through them. Number 1, tender and contract awards subject to the established criteria for delegation of authority for the month of August 2020. Draft Integrated Economic Development Strategic Plan update. We have no, Councillor Chappell.
I was just wondering if there's anyone from staff to speak on the draft plan for the economic development.
So yes, I think it's just a matter of what your question is.
I guess there's no presentation. That's fine. I'll leave it. I read the file.
Councillor Ostrov.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry, Mayor Patterson. I was distracted reading this one. Are we going to have a presentation on the integrated economic? Or are you saying no? Did I miss that?
No. So this is an information report.
Yes.
On an update of the draft plan. And if I remember correctly, we were discussing this at the Kingston ECDEV board meeting earlier this week, that this will come in a final version to council with a presentation towards the end of, I believe, in December.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to say, I think it's a good report. I wanted to make a comment on it, or not. No comments then. Okay. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Questions only, but certain comments and discussion when it comes in December. Okay. We have no information reports from members of council. Miscellaneous business. We have 2 motions. Number 1, the following councillors have indicated that they are willing to serve as deputy mayor for 2-month increments. Councillor Holland, Councillor Hill. So the clerk is going to do a draw of names. Councillor, Deputy Mayor Osterhoff, did you have a question, or did you want to? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to add my name to that list.
Okay, we can do that. Is there anybody else that wishes to throw their name in? Councillor Neal. Thank you. Anybody else? There aren't as many events to attend these days. If that's a factor.
The first name drawn is Councillor Osterhoff. Can't see it. Second name drawn is Councillor Holland. Third name drawn is Councillor Hill, which leaves as our fourth name Councillor Neal. So Councillor Holland will be December 2020 and January 2021. Sorry, Councillor Osterhoff will be December 20th and January 2021. And then we had Councillor Holland, who was for February and March 2021. Then it was Councillor Hill for April and May 2021, and Councillor Neal for June and July of 2021. And that will be confirmed at our meeting on November 3rd. Reminder to members of council, you do have an opportunity to make a trade in the meantime. If so, please communicate that to us.
Thank you very much. Miscellaneous business motion number 2, that is requested by Andrea Howard, Canadian Centre of Women's Empowerment. Council proclaimed November 26, 2020 as the Day of Awareness for Survivors of Financial Abuse and Economic Injustice. Moved by Councillor Holland, seconded by Councillor Kiley. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, on to new motions. We have 2 new motions this evening. Number 1, moved by Councillor Chappell, seconded by Councillor Kiley. Whereas Kingston City Council is responsible for allocating more than $2 billion in a given 4-year council term across all municipal departments and utilities Kingston. Whereas Kingston City Council is responsible for monitoring the more than $500 million of debt and approving new debt as needs may arise. And whereas Kingston City Council deemed fiscal responsibility and accountability as a guiding principle of its strategic plan, including a commitment to create efficiencies and synergies, balance tax and non-tax revenue, and manage debt effectively. And whereas Kingston City Council only has 2 evenings a year in form of budget meetings to review, question, and otherwise examine such vast spending, save for quarterly updates of staff's delegated authority spending or specific reports on debenture approvals. And whereas many other municipalities in Ontario, like Barrie and Belleville, have a finance committee to conduct a more direct, democratic, and detailed overview of public funds, whereas Kingston does not have such a finance committee for the same purposes, therefore be it resolved that Council directs staff to report back by the end of Q1 2021 with options for increasing Council's financial oversight with respect to matters of fiscal policy, the external audit process, financial reporting, financial processes, and internal controls. Councillor Chappelle, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. First off, I'd like to thank my colleague, Councillor Kiley. We spent quite a bit of time working out the crux of this motion. And I'd also like to thank staff, in particular Desiree Kennedy, our treasurer. We originally had a motion that would come forward that would be more prescriptive, but after consultation with staff, we decided that we would filter out a few other ideas that might percolate to make our eventual proposal even stronger and better for the open and transparent approach that we'd like to take to finances within the city of Kingston. Since being elected, I was championing about the fact that our city had $600 million in debt, and I would argue on a regular basis per budget season that, oh no, it's only $400 million, but there is $200 or $191 million of committed expenses from the previous council for the bridge and other items that hadn't yet hit the books yet. And we're finally now reporting it as debt spent and debt committed, which I think is great because it gives greater transparency to the public. But I find it very troublesome that we get comments throughout the course of our presentations that, oh, you know, did we anticipate spending $189,000? Well, it was in the budget. Well, you know what? I didn't see that line in the budget because all we see is this conglomerate of a massive pool for segregation of specific committees. And what happens is we don't have another granular approach. So if we had some sort of committee, I would say take 1 or 2 or even as many as 4 through the course of council's term that would have a greater in-depth perspective that could report back to council, say, listen, you know, the operations team over with Public Works are doing an incredible job. They've extended, extra sidewalk clearance this year, and this is how they managed to do it. And we have, as councillors, greater understanding of how the money is spent. We can share that and educate our residents of where that $400 million a year is going. And we also have an opportunity then to educate the public that there's only really about 26% of our actual budget in any given year that we as councillors have any direct say on, because the balance of everything else is all mandated by provincial jurisdiction. So there's a lot of misunderstanding of how we spend the money. But I think this is just all about a greater step to encouraging people to understand where we are going as a city, what our priorities are, and how we're best trying to be the stewards of their tax dollar, because that, as our board of directors of this corporation, is our fiduciary responsibility that we need to take seriously. And so I'm hoping to get your support tonight. This is just asking staff to pull back some ideas. There's really nothing committing to this other than finding more information. I think that's great for everybody. And I thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. This is Councillor McLaren.
So I have a few questions for the mover on the therefore be resolved clause. Can I ask, what do you envision being different from what we have now with regards to our financial oversight with respect to matters of fiscal policy? We set policy and staff carries it out. What, may I ask on that point, do you expect to see or get differently?
Mr. Chappelle?
I'm still on? Oh, great. Through your worship. Councillor McLaren, that's an excellent example. I think really how I would break that down and parse it out for you would be simply this. We do have policy. One of them is a delegated authority of $50,000, which recently came back to our policy administration committee a few weeks ago, asking for us to increase that to $100,000, which then removes us even further away from the decision making. So this is an opportunity to actually to review fiscal policy to ensure that we're more in lockstep with what's happening in our community. So we have the COVID issue going on right now, and we need to make sure that we can ensure that we have our parks taken care of, and there's other priorities. Homelessness was a huge issue that shifted greatly over the last year. So these are opportunities to relook at our priorities in a fiscal lens and to make sure that we are addressing the community needs. But in addition to that, offer greater transparency. So for example, this would be an opportunity to perhaps review our purchasing policy to ensure that we have more local representation. And I know that we do it through Badingo, but what this would allow us to do is if we're buying cars, we can go out and we can have staff say, listen, post it on Badingo is this proposal, and we're buying 4 trucks this year, and send an email to every one of those member communities who have people who play hockey locally, who support our kids locally, and say, please bid on this through Badingo. If you need help, our staff will assist you. And the fact of the matter is, we just recently found out that Badingo, there's no charge for small businesses in Kingston to bid on projects in Kingston because the city pays the Badingo fee, which was an incredible revelation that happened only a few weeks ago. And that information hasn't get out. So this is an opportunity for people to bring forward proposals and options to look at how we're spending our money in a more granular fashion that we don't have the time to do. And it would take a dedicated group of counselors and perhaps some external financial efficiency experts to come in and work with staff, or the treasurer would be the point person. And we don't even know what the committee form is going to look like yet without some input back from staff. But we've had preliminary discussions with Ms. Kennedy, and she's supportive of the idea. The whole aspect of, moving towards participatory budgeting, Councillor McLaren, this would be a great opportunity for you to bring forward ideas of non-tax revenue streams for the city. I think this is a win for those people who are interested in fiscal policy.
Okay, I'm asking you actually to try and sell me on this, but some of this isn't there. There's nothing on participatory budgeting or how to bring forth ideas on non-tax revenue, so I'm sorry that didn't help. But you suggested also that we should review our purchasing policy. I believe that's what we have admin policies for, committee. So I'm not sure why we would need another one. You also mentioned that you're looking to get more granular at this. I'm not an accountant, and I'm not sure I want to do accounting at that level. Part of what we're supposed to do, as I see it, is governance and oversight on a large level. That's why we have professional outside accountants who look at this. So on the second point in your motion, you're saying you want council's oversight with respect to external audit processes. What do you imagine that councillors, I assume none of us are professional accountants here, can tell professional accountants on their ability to do their job properly?
Well, Councillor McLaren, I think your point, I appreciate you always wishing to be pleasantly argumentative with me, and I understand that tension, but my concern really is on the audit committee. It goes to policy admin. We get a proposal that the audit committee puts forward. This year was the first time ever at policy admin that members of the committee could recall that we actually asked the accountant firm to bring in another line of sight, which would be to list all of the consultants and all of the fees per department for consultants in that audit report coming to council. Before that, it's just a clarify. So these are opportunities that you could do at a finance department, a finance committee. These are options, because as far as the oversight is concerned, we just approved the budget. The audit committee, boom, goes to council, gets passed. And look at how many times we have items that come before council with delegated authority, and we don't even get to speak on it. It just zips past through on the agenda. I think people who are concerned about finances would like to participate in a committee that addresses these concerns and helps bring greater transparency to the community.
Okay, may I also ask, what do you feel would be different this time with regards to financial reporting and financial processes and internal controls? If I recall, at the beginning of this council term, we asked for that kind of stuff on a special case basis in order to find money for affordable housing. And I believe at the end of it all, we found like 18 million or something. I do recall we had some conversations about which projects we would like to defer and move back or cancel altogether. But if I recall, council had no interest in actually choosing those projects and sent it back to staff to do that. I'm curious as to how you envision this as being different from what we've already been doing.
Point of order.
Who is the point of order? Councillor Stroud? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. The debate format, I don't believe, allows for a back and forth between members like this. Each of us, but you know, if so, we could ask each other questions at any time, and you'd have an endless debate. This is something the two councillors should be speaking to each other offline if they want to go further in the debate.
Okay. So your point of order. So I recognize it. But in my ruling, this is fair. So we do allow councillors to ask questions of the mover of a motion only. So this is not opening up the door for us all to kind of have a, discussion and debate. The only reason why I'm allowing Councillor Chappelle to answer these questions is because Councillor McLaren is asking them. But he will, that's up to him. And then if people want to ask staff questions, they can ask staff questions. But I do allow questions of the mover as well. I understand, but I do believe it's in order. Councillor McLaren, you have the floor. You still have 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
So this is just my last question, and it's the same one.
I'd like to challenge the chair, please.
Okay, challenge of the chair. Councillor Stroud.
Okay, the mayor is allowing multiple questions. If it was one question or a set of questions to the mover, I would believe it would be within procedural rules of order. Multiple questions for a total of greater than 5 minutes is contrary to the rules of order. And I believe that my fellow councillors don't want to see this kind of thing at a council meeting where you have two members debating each other with multiple back and forth responses. I agree with what the mayor said is the mover is allowed to answer questions, but I would submit that is a one-time only per member. Each member can ask the mover a set of one or a set of questions, and he has one chance to respond. When you start having multiple responses, it turns into a debate. And then that is my challenge to the chair, and I'll see what my colleagues think.
Thank you. So with a challenge to the chair, I will give a response and then we will call the vote. My response to that is, Councillor Stroud, if you want to bring forward an amendment to our procedural bylaw that restricts councillors to only ask one question of the mover of the motion, I am perfectly fine with that. However, as the chair, I have to rule within the procedural bylaw that is in front of us right now. And so under that, my interpretation is to treat the mover of a motion the same way as I would staff. We allow councillors to ask multiple questions of staff, then we can do the same for the mover of the motion. I do exactly the same process, which is to stop the clock when the question is being answered, and then I resume the clock when the person with the floor begins to speak. So that's my explanation. At this point, then we will move to a vote for challenge of the chair. So if it is a yes vote, then you are aligning with Councillor Stroud. If it's a no vote, then you would align with myself. And then we will see based on that outcome how we want to carry on this one. Okay, so we will call the vote on the challenge of the chair. Point of order only. Councillor Chappelle, point of order.
Yes, through your chair. As I am recipient of all the questions, can I abstain from this vote?
There is no abstaining in a vote of then I think it's counted as a no. So we'll call the vote then on the challenge to the chair. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, so the challenge to the chair is lost. Councillor McLaren, it is back to you. You have 2 minutes left on the clock.
Thank you, and it'll be really quick, and I'm not trying to debate him. I'm asking for more information on what he envisions here and the hopes of finding a reason to support him. considering what we've done in the past, earlier this term, where we asked for the last three things that are on your resolve clause, and council didn't seem to want to actually do anything but send them back to staff, how do you imagine that this would be different now? Would you imagine that we would still be choosing for staff what and how to do things, or just wasting time?
I'm having difficulty hearing you. I'll have to just get you to repeat. It was like a fan or something in the background. I'm sorry, Councilor McLaren.
That's my computer overheating. Closer to the mic. But the last three requests under the resolve clause, financial reporting, financial processes, and internal controls, we had asked about that at the beginning of our term in context of finding $18 million for affordable housing. The result of that was that we essentially sent it back to staff to do what we asked. This seems to be the way governance works. We tell them what we want and they do it the way they do it. We don't usually tell them how to do it. How do you envision that this would be any different from what we've already and can already do?
Councilor McLaren, that's a great question. The way I envision this is to get some input from staff on how to have greater clarity and transparency with respect to the way we're spending money. So for example, we heard today in the report on the environment that the word consultant slipped out, but there is nothing mentioned on how much we're paying that consultant. So we have consultants for everything. So maybe that is just one area of interest that this committee would be able to focus on, is to review the number of consultants that we have. We have a person that we send around the city of Kingston looking at our sidewalks for $50,000, $60,000 a year to find out which ones are correct. We have consultants for doing almost everything in the city. And either we start investing in our staff to get them trained up. That's an opportunity to make our city more engaged and have better educated staff, so we don't have to hire consultants all the time. Because that is a operating expense instead of it's a capital expense rather than an operating expense. And so money gets pushed around in so many different ways that we can't keep track. So what this committee will do, will say, look, we have an issue with understanding how we're supporting our homeless. And we have all these committees. Where's the money going? How are we supporting them? How many homes are we getting? So it allows us to have a more granular focus on a specific problem or specific issue. Maybe it's transit. How are the routes being divvied up? And how come, these buses, I keep getting emails of they're empty, or I don't have bus service, or where can I get bus service? So this committee, as a finance committee, can look at a more granular level on maybe these routes should be improved in this manner. Would that work, staff? Maybe so be more of an activist functional council that takes on projects of financial nature. That's where it's different, rather than always having staff report. Another thing too is to ensure that staff provide us with options, rather than just saying you have to choose A or B is going to happen. What about however happening? Here are options A, B, C, and D. This is your best option, and these are the options. This is an opportunity for that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Chabot. I think Councillor McLaren has indicated that you've answered his question. So Councillor,
okay,
you have the floor.
Yes, I think those examples suggest that this is perhaps a little bit too much into the how to do it as opposed to the what they should be doing. This is moving from governance into operations a little too much. I'm sorry, it wasn't convincing.
Okay, next on my list is Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Quick question to Ms. Kennedy. Is this a reasonable workload and a reasonable time frame for you to report back to council?
I see Seo Hurdle with her hand up.
Thank you. Miss Kennedy is on some very well-deserved vacation this week.
Good for her.
I had the chance to connect with her on this, and I know that Director Lana Folds is also on the meeting today. So the details that are in the motion is something that the finance group feels is feasible in terms of reporting back information to council on what some of the best practices are in other communities. And I can assure members of council, because I've heard some questions around policy and operations, that the focus, of course, of these committees is more on governance and policy. So we will be reporting that information within that time frame, and I believe that that finance is comfortable with the scope and the timing.
Thank you. That's reassuring. I'm a little conflicted on this motion, and I shared some of my concerns with Councillor Chappell earlier when I read this. I would hate for this to go back to the 1990s when I was on my first 2 terms, where councillors tried to do line by line budget analysis, which can be very, very problematic and make for very, very long meetings, which I know aren't necessarily a concern for some of us. But I think what makes me lean towards at least supporting this to get a report back is that there's a potential for this to address a little greater transparency for both us as councillors and for the community, and also to have a more open governance style, because the public would have an opportunity to follow some of these questions and indeed could suggest suitable questions to ask. So because this is asking for a report that our staff have told us is not going to create a kind of onerous workload issues for them, I'll be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Your Worship. I heard what Councillor Chappell had to say there, and he did mention that he had sat on an audit committee. I think that's what he said. And I suspect had there been any issues that came out of that audit committee, we would have heard about them at council, and we didn't. So would suggest that the audit committee or whatever group that was confident in the work that staff was being done. So I'm struggling with this because I feel like it's sending a message in some respects, and I think it's probably an unintended message, but I think there's an undercurrent there, and we've heard that undercurrent regularly during the council meetings. One of the things that I'm really struggling with, and presumably this report, if it gets approved tonight, will bring this back, is that we currently can't fill our quota for committees for councillors sitting on committees right now. So this would require, as part of this review, looking at the number of councillors who sit on committees in general. I'm already on 5 or 6 committees, of which planning is one, and it is a significant undertaking. I'm paid well for that, so I don't have any complaints about it, but you're going to be adding, a significant amount of work back into this. I mean, Councillor Chappell himself sat on planning committee and had to step aside because of time constraints, and we haven't been able to fill that spot on planning committee.
Point of order, Councillor Chappell.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are other personal reasons for not.
No. That's not a point of order. You can't debate what another councillor says, unless you think I've done something procedurally wrong.
Okay.
Councillor Hill, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. So, I think that's a big issue. Looking at the level of workload for staff, at the expectations that are going to fall to councillors. I think the other thing too is that. Again, it's that undercurrent of messaging, right? As Councillor McLaren said, we have lots of safeguards in place. We've got lots of oversight provisions in place. We get regular reports. We spend a great deal of time going through the budget carefully. We have a CAO and a Director of Finance that we charge with ensuring that that the budget is being well dealt with and it's accurate and that it's above board. And where we don't have confidence in that, we can search that out. So I just don't see the value in that, to be honest with you. The only thing that I would see as being of some benefit in this regard is that it would safeguard staff. And that's, I think, of some value. And quite frankly, it would safeguard staff from some of the insinuations that come on occasion from this council. So if that's the intent at the end of the day, when the report comes back, if staff feel more comfortable because of that, then it would be something that I would support. So I would support the report. I am uncomfortable down the road with the, well, we'll have to see where the report goes in terms of my support down the road for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I want to thank Councillor McLaren for his questions. I really question the same thing. I'm not sure what is different from what this motion is proposing from what we're actually already doing. And our council supported an open budget process, and that is designed to educate the community and to receive feedback from the community. So we're already moving towards a more public oversight of our budgets. And I also appreciate and agree with everything that Councillor Hill just said. I am open definitely to a report because we heard from staff that that's not too onerous and regarding time-wise for staff. But I do have concerns with the intent and where this may lead in oversight and perhaps micromanagement too. So yeah, I'll support this motion because I look forward to hearing about the report because of course we take oversight, financial oversight seriously, but I do have my reservations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Through you, I think I'll start by addressing the concerns that Councillor Doherty and Councillor Hill have expressed. And I can see, based on previous comments from council from time to time, which were frankly unfortunate, why that might be thought of. But I can assure them that both myself and the mover, Councillor Chappelle, have met on numerous occasions with Ms. Kennedy and respect the work of her and her team. Ms. Folds is here tonight. And there's nothing to suggest in this that there's nefarious action or things being swept under the rug in a negative way. Honestly, that is not the intent. And again, Ms. Kennedy worked with us to come up with this motion. So it's been in collaboration with staff from the beginning. The other thing I would like to point out is in that collaboration with staff, we've moved away from actually asking for a committee, and I know Councillor Chappelle addressed this briefly, but I think it's worth mentioning. Well, the whereas clauses have mention of committee, it is just a study. So for the councillors who have identified that, thank you. We're not asking for a committee at this point. It's just for increased oversight. Though I would also mention that to me, it's quite odd that a $400 million corporation doesn't have a finance committee. The Limestone District School Board has a finance committee. The Kingston Health Science Center has a finance committee. A bunch of municipalities that I don't need to list here. Queens has a finance committee. So an organization of our stature, and because we're a public organization dealing with the people's money, I think it's actually appropriate that we pursue options to have increased transparency, as Councillor Neal said. And that's my big reason for supporting this, because even though we have rightly identified participatory budgeting and increased public engagement around the budget, neither of those things in and of themselves are direct oversight of city departments or how money is spent day to day. And if there's a concern that we could get into the minutia of doing line by line in a way that is unproductive, and I definitely see that as a possibility, so we have to guard against it. And I hope that the report from staff, if passed tonight, will steer us away from that. But I do want to give an example of where, through the Administrative Policy Committee, we actually do that for Rideau Crest Home. We dissolve from the Admin Policy Committee into the Rideau Crest Home Board of Management, and we actually go essentially line by line, where the administrator at the home says, this month, below our budgeting on staffing, but we're over on other costs. Therefore, we'll balance out, and we're expecting a new provincial grant next month, which will help us, bring new standards in line for COVID, et cetera, et cetera. So there is actually a role, in my opinion, at least, for councillors to be involved with that, to do so in a way that is respectful and a way that isn't too operational. But I don't think we should shy away from the people's representatives being part of deciding whether and where the people's money goes. And the last comment I would make is, I would hope, and I've expressed this to Ms. Kennedy one-on-one and with Councillor Chappelle on, again, numerous occasions over the last 2 years of being elected, that if we were to have a committee, and that's getting the hypotheticals that I recognize, but if we were, that we could have public members on it. So it wouldn't just be councillors. And that would, again, be in the spirit of having increased transparency and public participation throughout the year and throughout the council term. So I'm definitely supporting this, happy to second it. And right now it is just a report. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, will you take the chair?
I will, and I recognize you, Mayor Patterson.
Great. Thank you. Certainly appreciate the comments around the table here. I'm happy to support the motion that is in front of us that's asking for information that staff are happy to provide us in terms of additional options for financial oversight. There does seem to be a lot of discussion about a finance committee, even though it's, as Councillor Kylie said, is not written into the motion, but I think there is some uneasiness there. The only thing that I would say there is I actually take a bit of a different view on this. I believe we do have a finance committee. It's called City Council. It meets every 2 weeks. Every expenditure that comes to us, we can ask many questions of council, we can ask of staff, we can ask for information, we can probe, we can debate, we can discuss. It's really up to council to decide how far and how and where we want to probe based on concerns or things that we read. And so I think that's the forum and mechanism that we have. The concern that I have is, of course, a finance committee delegating financial decisions to a subgroup of council. These are very, very important. There's a reason why all of council should be involved in this. There's a reason why all of council was involved in setting the financial targets for the tax rate that then govern all of these subsequent decisions that then come to council. So that's why, yes, we take a very different approach from what was once done many years ago, where you go line by line through a budget. We take an opposite approach. We say, this is the target, and then staff work towards that target. I think it works way, way better. So I would just throw that out there. I know that we're not talking about a finance committee, but I just want to be on record saying, I wouldn't support that. That needs to stay at a council level. That being said, I am certainly interested and happy to see what staff would bring forward in terms of other best practices to be able to improve financial oversight. Thank you.
And I return the chair to you.
Thank you. Next on my list is Councillor Bone.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, you basically answered some of the concerns that I had about this and what you said, and then Councillor Kylie also mentioned some things that address some of the concerns, and I think part of it was just more about the whole issue of public engagement and also understanding how the budgetary process works. So I will support this motion because I'm interested in seeing, it's basically looking for more information and doing a bit more research, and staff have indicated they have the capacity to do that. So I think it comes from a good place of trying to engage the community more and understand the process better. And if the end result of this is to educate the community on how the process works, or come up with different ways of looking at that process or involving the community in that process, I don't really think it's a negative. So I will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Osanek.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be supporting this motion as well. I feel like we'll be getting good information, and the more information, the better. It helps our understanding, and then we can explain it to our constituents and try to dispel any, misconceptions out there, rumors, second guessing about what the city is doing. So I definitely support this. I think Councillor Kiley made a really good example of how the Administrative Policies Committee goes into Committee of the Whole to ask, detailed questions about Rideau Crest. And, so I would probably even support the formation of a finance committee, to see how it goes, give it a try. And I do think the more information, the better. And I do like that one suggestion already about looking to see how much the city spends on consultants. I commend the Administrative Policies Committees for asking that to our auditors. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I found myself, I found the motion actually unduly provocative, but more than that, I'm a bit divided on this because when I've asked for a line-by-line budget 3 or 4 times at least when I'm on council, and that's going back a ways, which was, I couldn't find very many councillors, if any, that were interested. And we did, when in 2007, when I was first elected, we did get a line-by-line budget, and it was very useful because you could look up and see what was supposed to be spent where in your district. And at the time, there was plenty to be done. So, so when someone asked for more clarity, I'm fine with that, but I would remember that you ask for it, you got to do the work. And so in that sense, I sort of like, okay, if I just ignore the whereas clauses and look at the resolve clause, okay, maybe. But I'm more concerned about the issue I think brought up is about the Administration Policies Committee. Frankly, they received the audit. They're supposed to do that job, look at it. And they can ask any question like any other councillor, either at committee or at council. And so I'm not sure what we're going to get out of this. It's, you can ask for a list of consultants. You can ask for, and most of the time you'll get your answer. You might have to ask 2 or 3 times, but staff will give it to you and eventually. But more importantly than that, I have a governance issue with this. First of all, as Councillor Hill pointed out, you're increasing the number of bureaucratic way stations, which if it's at a Min Paul or change the mandate of a Min Paul, then why do you need it? More importantly than that is I'm concerned about having committees that have different levels of power, such as in a board of control or an executive committee or a budget committee, which you sometimes see in larger cities. I don't want anything to do with that. Like the mayor, I believe it belongs with council and there'd be no difference in powers between councillors. We had that in Kingston and it got dropped for that very reason. I don't want to go back to that. I consider it less democratic. And finally, if you look at, if you look at people that deal with governance, for instance, Carver or someone of that sort, they will remind you that if you don't actually do the work, like our staff does, our treasurer, our different commissioners, there's always going to be an opaqueness between you and what the staff do and vice versa, because the roles are different. That's why we are dealing, as Councillor McLaren said, with what? What are we going to do? We're not so much dealing with how. Now we can question that, and that sometimes can be important, but we're not actually doing it. And I think people should be, we're very aware that in a situation this size of corporation, you are not going to know. I know this from organizations that are much smaller. If you're not doing the work, you're not going to understand it the same way, partly because the first thing a staff member thinks of is how. The what can drive them a little crazy from time to time, but the how is what they first think of. And so I think I might vote for this, but I will not be voting for a finance committee because it may transmute, and I think Councillor Doherty said this, it can transmute into something we don't want. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Strap.
Thank you. It's been a long night. I'm tempted to ask the mover a few questions, get a little back and forth going, but I've had my say on that. No, I just want to address a few aspects of this because I'm currently chair of the Administrative Policies Committee, and yes, we received the audit, and yes, as Councillor Chappelle mentioned, we did ask and received more detailed information this time round on the audit. Mostly because of Councillor Chappelle's inquisitiveness. Thank you for that, Councillor. It's always been clear to me because the chair of the committee actually meets with the auditors and with the treasurer before it comes to committee just to go over some of the detail and very high level. But the audit process is real. It does happen at the committee, but ultimately it passes or doesn't pass council. And if there were a problem with the audit process, it is up to us. The buck stops with us here at council, as the mayor said. It is, you can have committees, but they should all feed into one central council as it does currently. So that is perhaps behind, that reality is perhaps why Councillor McLaren questions the need for this process with this report, why Councillor Hill was saying, you know, obviously, why go looking for a problem? If there were a problem, we would have picked it up at various stages. However, I would say that in general, having sat on administrative policies for many years, I'm on my second bout as chair. I know Councillor Bohm, Councillor Holland have also chaired the committee. It is not, although we do spend some time on some of these financial matters, it is not what I would say transparent enough for me to have the confidence to report to my constituents with any level of certainty what's actually happening with the city finances. It is an inconvenient truth that we all live with. That we are amateur citizens from all the different backgrounds. Democratically, we need to be here. We need to be from all our different backgrounds, all our different geographical areas, because we are standing in for our constituents that live in those neighborhoods. And we need to be amateurs and as such, not accountants, not financial experts. But we also need more transparency than we currently enjoy. You can never have too much. We had it as a priority last term of council, open government. We didn't really get the transparency piece, I gotta say. And if that's what this is taking us to, I'm all for it. I will support the motion. I'd like to say on the side issue of whether or not we should have a formal finance committee or not, we have plenty of umbrella committees. We have 4 umbrella committees, each one with 6 councillors on it. We could easily resolve into that type of committee with, same as Councillor Kiley said, as we do with Rideau Crest. With Rideau Crest, we resolve into their board of management and we go into that detail. We could do that from a financial perspective, not just at the audit, but in other times. I think maybe adding, maybe that's what will come from staff. They will suggest bringing extra reports to one of our committees and therefore to council to look at this. And if it adds transparency, I'm all for it. I need to be able to go back to my constituents with a greater level of certainty that I can speak for where the money is going. That's what is motivating Councillor Chappelle, and I applaud him for bringing this up. It's not an easy subject. It sounds like we have consensus on this tonight. Thank you all for your thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chappelle, you have the last word.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for my fellow councillors for asking such structured and well thought out questions. this is definitely a topic that's worthy of debate, and I appreciate that over the course of this term, I've raised issues of financial scrutiny, and it's only because the constituents I've talked to want to understand more. This is not a witch hunt for staff. I'm very confident in the work the staff does, but sometimes we just don't have all the information. It's like Councillor Hutchison has suggested. It's like standing on the Grand Canyon. We're at one side and staff are on the other. Staff do all the work every day, and we do it, a couple hours a week. So there's a huge information gap. All I'm trying to do is clean out more information so we can share it with our constituents, so we can help them understand how we're supporting them in our community, our great community of Kingston. And so with that, I just look forward to what staff comes back at. It may be a whole amalgam of different ideas, but at least at the end of the day, we'll have a formal discussion on how we can improve the transparency that I know that Councillor McLaren always asks for, and support the needs of our residents that want more information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will call the vote on new motion number 1. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. New motion number 2, moved by Councillor Hutchison, seconded by Councillor Osanek. Whereas Innate, the Capital Developments, Inc. and Foten Consultants, Inc. have requested a zoning bylaw amendment for property municipally known as 223 Princess Street, and whereas the delegation of authority bylaw allows for council to bump up site plan control applications to planning committee, therefore be it resolved that the site plan control application for 223 Princess Street be bumped up to the planning committee. Councillor Hutchison, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's probably fairly obvious why this motion is in front of you tonight. We had one regarding the spa that Councillor Usraf brought forward because he's the councillor for Countryside. And so we have this proposal, which is being controversial, to put it mildly. But now this is an allowance in our rules of order and procedure that allows the public to talk about the details that were not included in the motion that was passed just a couple of meetings ago. So I'm just asking council to allow that to happen, give the public the opportunity. Thanks very much.
Yes, Councillor Sanek.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to follow up with what Councillor Hutchison said, for those members of council, especially who weren't at the planning committee meetings maybe. So the issues that were addressed at the public meetings that we need site plan to look at are bicycle storage, the balconies, especially because we don't have the balconies all being recessed, they're sticking out. So the allowed uses for the balconies, who's going to monitor the inappropriate use, how will it be controlled by who, the consequences, like we don't want to have the balconies full of bikes and Rubbermaid containers, the storage units in the building, how many, where, who gets to use them, the conservation of the facade on Princess Street, what is the conservation plan, who will verify that it meets the heritage requirements, the loading zone. Apparently the zoning bylaw right now doesn't allow for screening. Screening would be good. Will there be a restriction on the hours of use? The garbage pickup from the loading zone, or will the garbage be picked up from inside the parking garage? Recycling, where are the bins going to be? Who's going to check that they're properly sorted? There seems to be a rumor that there's going to be separate garbage chutes, and the garbage chutes will also be for recycling. So we want to ensure that the recycling would actually be separated from the garbage. The green bin pickup, is there going to be green bin pickup? And the rooftop mechanical, one of the major points with 223 Princess Street was the height. So we know that the mechanical will be, the 13th floor. And how can we make that 13th floor look attractive? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stroud.
Thanks, Your Worship. I will support this bump up motion. I think it's rational. It's mandatory almost. Thank you to Councillors Hutchinson and Osanek for bringing it forward. I just want to point out, because it was in the news, that we're not out of the woods yet on this application, and that a very strong site plan dealing and treatment and public process with this will help, will hopefully help soften the eventual intrusion of this development. If it's the least we could do with this having passed council, and hopefully that's all we will need to do, and that it won't be a repeat of last time where it was a court battle and all that stuff with the community getting involved, because that ends up dividing the community. So hopefully this moves us closer to something that people can live with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will call the vote on new motion number 2. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, moving on. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, ask for minutes, please.
Moved by Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Osterhoff, that the minutes of City Council meeting number 2020-25 held Tuesday, October 6th, 2020 be confirmed.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, we have some tabling of documents, a number of communications. Is there any other business? Mr. Clerk, ask for bylaws, please.
Moved by Councillor Hill, seconded by Councillor Boehm, that bylaws 1 through 6 and 8 be given their first and second reading.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries.
Moved by Councillor Hill, seconded by Councillor Boehm, that clause 11.36 of bylaw number 2010-1 as amended be suspended for the purpose of giving bylaw 1 3 readings.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
That's it.
I thought there was a third. Okay, with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Boehm, seconded by Councillor Neal. All those in favor? Opposed? And we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.